Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast, and I am your host, Samuel. In this podcast, I interview top medical sales reps and leading medical sales executives across the entire country. And it doesn't matter what medical sales industry, from medical device to pharmaceutical to genetic testing to diagnostic lab, you name it. You will learn how to either break into the industry, be a top 5% performer within your role in sales, or climb the corporate ladder. Welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. So last week we took a break from airing an episode, and this is the reason why. Our core business is to help people that want to enter the industry in healthcare, sales, anything revolving around healthcare sales, from customer service to being an actual sales rep. Our core focus is to help people get into the industry and to work with sales professionals and sales teams for that optimal performance. Whether it's an individual sales professional that wants to get to the next level or wants to have a higher performance for the year, or it's a team of sales professionals that are trying to do something to get access to more customers, to focus on development within their team as far as how they're analyzing the business and executing. Everything is involved with that core focus, helping professionals get to where they want to go and helping sales professionals and sales teams experience the results they want to experience. And last week, we needed to focus on that because we are experiencing growth in our programs. And again, that's our core focus. So we took a break and we did not have an episode aired last week. However, we are back and we are ready to continue. And we're going to have an amazing guest this episode and the weeks to follow. This week we have with us Kris Krustangel. He is the Vice President of Business Development at Saluda Medical. And his story, as always, his story is another impressive story and what he's done in his career to get where he is today. And his outlook is really unique. And he's going to talk about that in the episode today. And there's something for everyone. For those that want to get into the industry, you want to hear this. For those that are in the industry and want to develop further, you want to hear this. And for those that are leading the way, you definitely want to hear this. So as always, thank you for listening to the Medical Sales Podcast, and I hope you enjoy this episode. One thing that I really want the audience to understand is, why you're in this space.
Sure.
We're going to get into some of your history and everything that you've been through to get to where you are today in your role. But what connects you to neuromodulation?
Yeah. So I'll back into the answer because I think I know where you're going with this, but I'll tell you that like a lot of things, sometimes it's just the people that the networking and whatnot. I mean, that kind of brought me into neuromodulation. Fast forward over the 15 years I've been here, my mother is implanted with a spinal cord stimulator. It's changed her life, changed our lives. And, I've had at least a couple family members that have been negatively impacted by the opioid epidemic. So it's become maybe not the very first day I started, but over these 15 years become very personal for me, this space and what the wonderful providers, these interventional pain physicians do on a daily basis for the patient community.
Got it. And if you can just tell us a little bit about what happens in your type of space when it comes to medical devices.
Yeah. So we work primarily with interventional pain physicians, a little bit with ortho spine and neurospine. And you've had some past guests on that are actually interventional pain physicians. Mm-hmm. So if you haven't listened to that, go back and listen to that 2 series set. That's a good one.
Right.
But there's 50 million patients in chronic pain in the United States. About half of them are seeing a physician, but almost all of those are not seeing pain physicians. There's only about 4 million that are actually seeing pain physicians.
Wow.
And so that's where we are. We're in that space with the pain provider. A patient of ours would usually take 5, 6, 7, 8 years before they got to an interventional pain physician. Mm-hmm. The pain physician will, kind of diagnose and treat. Usually it's conservative therapy, medical management, physical therapy, injections. And over a course of time, maybe it's a couple months, maybe it's a couple years, they eventually introduce spinal cord stimulation, right? Well, that's my section of neuromodulation I'm in. And what it is it's kind of a 2-phase procedure. There's a trial. It's usually 7 days, could be less, could be more, where the patient gets to test drive how it helps their chronic pain, usually the back and legs, but it could be other places. If it goes well, then we come back and the physician implants a permanent device, kind of like a pacemaker. And the patient basically lives with this therapy as a support mechanism, not a support, I should say, but as a way to help deliver therapy toward their chronic pain.
Got it. Okay. Well, now we want to know, how do you get here? So and you have pharmaceutical sales experience,
Yeah.
so that's even more curious. So let's take it back to, tell us your college experience, what you were thinking about doing, and then what happened next.
Yeah. So I've always been passionate about serving other people. I'm not exactly sure where that came from, but I've always liked the idea of helping other people do better, get better. And so I do remember when I was in college, I went to University of Washington, Seattle. I was in the business school, and it was like, where do you want to be? Econ or, entrepreneurship? And I actually got into a sales program. I was like, this seems fun. Let's do this. And had a wonderful professor, an ex Xerox guy, and just talked about this every day, getting to solve people's problems and how fun that was. And so I really latched onto the industries I thought had the biggest longevity. And, fast forward to healthcare, which is 20% of our GDP. It's a great space. And, I wasn't as educated as I am now today, but this is a phenomenal space because, we do what we do, and who benefits but a patient, right? They have a better life or a better outcome, or potentially, depending on what you're selling, saving their lives. So, right. I will say I was kind of naive on the front end. I just like the idea of solving problems, but now fast forward, solving problems in healthcare on a daily basis is just a phenomenal place.
So then where did you get your first role? You started with Eli Lilly, right?
Yep. I started with Eli Lilly in diabetes care out in Seattle. It was kind of my first run. We sold insulin and a metformin type product, and got a chance to work with endocrinologists, internal meds, and just medicine, just kind of like felt it out. It was kind of the first time I'd walked into physicians' offices before, and got a sense for how they operate. And when I mean operate, how they treat their patients, how they run their practices.
Right. So you were in the sales program in college, and then you just said, you know what, I want to take this into pharma. Or did somebody approach you, or did you see something?
Yeah, I think I just got lucky, honestly. I mean, a lot of things. I mean, for people listening, part of it is luck. That's the reality. I mean, you can increase the probability of luck by being prepared, right, and working hard. Don't get me wrong, but I knew I wanted to be in healthcare. I applied voraciously to a lot of pharmaceutical, medical device. I mean, pretty much anything I could get my hands on. I just tried to get as many interviews as I could, as quickly as I could. And Eli Lilly decided I was worthy enough to give an opportunity to. So
got it. And tell us a little bit about that. So you're in Eli Lilly, you're experiencing the pharma sales experience, and then you take it where?
I had a really good run for about a year and a half. I decided it was not as invasive as I wanted. Everybody I think had different pharmaceutical experience. For me, this was back in like early 2002. Sure. And I just wasn't as involved. I didn't feel like I could make the impact that I wanted. So then I stepped into a dermatology specialty role. I got a lot more geography. So I was like, this will solve the problem. And it was fun. Again, we had a good year and a half run. And then this opportunity currently that I have then came up, and I was like, oh, I've always wanted to break into medical device. That's where I've always wanted to be. And then that started, like I said, about 15 years ago. Wow.
So for those listeners that are in pharma and want to get into medical device, what's the best piece of advice you can give them?
I think you have to be clear on your intention, because I usually see one of two paths taken into pharmaceuticals. I see the pathway of I'm staying in pharmaceuticals because I'm good and I'm comfortable with it. And I mean that respectfully, because you're good and comfortable with it. But then I see people get into it and realize it's not a reflection of what they really want to get out of the role, and they make that pivot, and they have a story with that pivot, like similar to mine, which is I got in and it just wasn't the type of role that I wanted. Right. And so my advice is if you really wanted to get a medical device and you're in pharmaceuticals and you haven't been there for 10 or 20 years, great time, right? Find the medical device reps that call on the same offices you call on, and try to build some relationships and talk to them. There is value to me today to hiring a pharmaceutical rep who already works with my providers, right? Knowing that they have those relationships. So the pathway is there. The differentiator for me, if I'm ever interviewing them, is the clarity of why they're making the decision. Like I want to move from pharmaceuticals to medical device because of this, right? It has to really make sense to me.
Got it. What are the things you've heard that don't make sense to you?
Well, I mean, if people are just coming for more money, right? I think that's
Have you
honest.
been told that before?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, and there are different, obviously, opportunities to do a lot of different things in different roles, and medical device tends to reward their high performers really, really well. Sure. And so I get it. I get why people would want to move into that. But if that's your primary objective, sometimes I hold pause to that, because I just need to understand a little bit more about that, because it won't be forever, and it'll be really, really hard, really, really hard. And so that's usually one that kind of I pause on and push back a little bit with.
Got it. So, I mean, going from pharma to medical device, medical device was new to you, but you wanted it. So I'm sure you applied yourself. But I can see that you got into leadership pretty quickly. What prompted that? Is that just a natural progression of where you took things, or did you have your eye on leadership when you started?
So I've always kind of found myself in those positions. I'll say it goes back to kind of this idea of helping and serving other people, servant-based leadership. I've sometimes I ask people like, what do you want to be in 5 years? Or what do you, I couldn't even answer that for you. What I could tell you is that I will always say yes to opportunities where I get to, expand my value and help more people. Like that's just generally who I am. And so, when I started 15 years ago, it was really a startup. It was Advanced Bionics. It wasn't even Boston Scientific. Mm-hmm. So my progression from clinical specialist to territory manager and territory manager to leadership happened probably faster than normal. Mm-hmm. Part of that was the speed of the growth, but I just always put my hand up. I mean, volunteered, every department in the organization I was trying to help to learn and help them. And so naturally when, there was a leadership opportunity came up, and I think they saw me as a more well-rounded candidate and, allowed me to take that role on. Got it. So for those that are wanting to take those same kind of steps, outside of just putting your hand up for every opportunity, what are 2 or 3 things that you would definitely say they need to be thinking about? Yeah. So there's 2 things that I think about. One is that you have clarity of expectations with your leadership, that they know that you want this, right? Because I think that's, I have some people that they're interested only when it's convenient. Right. Does that make sense? Where maybe they're burnout on their current role and now they want to be a man. Right. I'm always a little suspect of the motives behind that. I'm really looking for someone that comes in and says, hey, I'm going to try to do this role for a couple of years. And then I want to be we call them regional business directors in my business. I want to be a regional business director, and that setting that expectation with me or their regional business director is really helpful, because then we're trying to align our coaching and our resources to really get them in the best spot so they're ready. So that's one thing I think, is to be clear with your leadership with what you want and how to get there. And the second thing is that you have to own it yourself. You are driving the car, Samuel. Like nobody's just going to walk you into this role. Yeah, nobody's just going to be like, oh, hey, it's your time. Number 226, 226. Oh, you're an RBD. You have to own it. You are driving the car, which means that on the nights and weekends, you're reading leadership books, you're listening to podcasts like this, you're taking Coursera.org or, some of these online training, or maybe they're going into your program, Samuel. I know you have an executive coaching program you mentioned. Mm-hmm. Yep. And so they're investing in themselves outside of the role. Mm-hmm. If I see someone who set clear expectations with me, and then I saw is just grinding outside the role to make themselves better, mm-hmm. I mean, they're in a pretty darn good spot when it comes to making a decision about who wants to be a leader in our organization. Gotcha. No, that makes a lot of sense. And, one thing I like about your experience is 2 tiers of leadership, right? You went to regional business director and then to area vice president. Yep. Talk to us a little bit about how leadership looks different. I'm sure some of the principles remain the same, but what are the differences between those 2 styles of leadership? Yeah, I mean, I think a regional business director or district sales manager, or whatever the role is called, is one of the most difficult roles that exist in medical devices, because you are in the thick of everything, right? You have the corporation kind of coming down on you, and then you have your team coming up at you, and you're like, you're pushing up on both these pressures and trying to come up with the solutions that can happen fast. And you're trying to protect your team and give them resources and remove things that get in their way. Mm-hmm. And so I think that I would say the line of sight is a little shorter. It's maybe a quarter or 2 ahead. They're still going to be ahead of their teams and trying to predict and get what they need. I think the biggest differentiator from that to my role is I need to be looking out a year and a half in advance, right? Where I'm trying to predict some industry trends. I'm trying to invest in resources before we need them. I'm also really trying to dive deep on coaching up people all throughout my team, so they're ready if there needs to be succession, et cetera. Sure. I think both are very hard. Going back to when I was an RBD, it was really, really tough. It was really tough. And maybe, it's just that first transition from you're an individual contributor, right? It's your territory. You're grinding, everything's on your shoulders. And then all of a sudden it's you have all this responsibility, but no technical control, right? And you're going to get paid, and they're going to put you on a sheet that says you're number 6 in the country or 60 in the country. You take that personal, and that's a hard headspace to be in. And so I think, anybody who takes on that role is a remarkable individual. And in order to kind of move to that next role, you got to get all that. And then you got to kind of be looking out, down the road more, and really be predicting the resources. And like I said, preparing for obstacles that might get in the way for the team's success.
Got it. So you've managed 2 sets within leadership. Yep. And you've probably seen, 15 years, you've seen all kinds of reps that anyone can imagine seeing. Yep. Give us some of the top qualities, maybe top 3 qualities that make an exceptional rep. And then maybe we'll discuss some of the pitfalls that kind of can go the opposite direction. But give us the top qualities first.
First off, I mean this respectfully to all industries, but to be a top rep in neuromodulation, it takes a lot, right? Because for us, we deal with the patient, we deal with the physician, we deal with the business. And so there's probably more like 20, but the ones that come to my mind these days is, again, a focus on empathy, being an empathetic individual that can really understand the needs and the challenges of the customer. It's not about their detail piece or their 2 best features of their product. Sure. It's about what problems is the customer facing, both personally and professionally for that matter? Mm-hmm. And how can I really provide value in that conversation or my activities and my resources with them? People who get that and get that quickly seem to have a lot of success. The second thing, especially at we call them territory managers, right? They're different roles, but that individual kind of sales rep role, is that they're able to have crucial conversations, or they manage conflict really well. And so they can drive it in a way that's appropriate. It's not inflammatory. It's not dramatic, but they can have tough conversations with customers to get them to see things they may have not seen without that conversation.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And remember, I have a couple programs that show you exactly how to break into the medical sales industry, become a top performing medical sales professional, and also how to masterfully navigate your career to executive level leadership. Check out these programs and learn more at evolveyoursuccess.com. Stay tuned for more awesome content with amazing interviews.